Ralph Lauren, there is this whole idea of it's really tapping into a very old-fashioned notion, which is kind of conspicuous leisure.
He had transformed the brand kind of positioning along with other designers of the time, but to create a full lifestyle brand.
This whole idea of people who have the money and therefore have the time and the leisure to enjoy themselves and to live in a way that's aspirational, to live in a way that everyone else wants to live. And that's something that's really expressed through what Ralph Lauren does.
He's really interesting in the way that he has such tight control over the stores and the shops and the windows and what he's selling. But actually, unlike any other design, it's taken on such a narrative of its own.
This notion of lifestyle that's so important today, this notion of lifestyle that so many different fashion companies are hankering after, is something that really started with Ralph Lauren.
Ralph Lifshitz was born in 1939 in the Bronx in New York, in Woolwich Park, which was a middle-class Jewish area. His family, his mother and father, were Jewish immigrants.
It was interesting that Ralph was interested in fashion, kind of fixated on fashion from a very early age. He always said the two pin-ups he had on his wall as a child were the Duke of Windsor and Katharine Hepburn. He was particularly obsessed with Katharine Hepburn during the Philadelphia story. And when you look at his later designs, you can certainly see the kind of aesthetic imprints of those two people across his clothes. There is that sense of Hollywood and a sense of a kind of mannish femininity that you see in Hepburn, and obviously there's an incredible sense of aristocratic Britishness.
When Ralph was 16, he and his brother changed their surname from Lifshitz to Lauren, in a kind of rebuke from being bullied for years at school.
Brother Jerry was in the Air Force and apparently got tired of humorous mispronunciations at roll call when the mail was delivered. And so Jerry and Ralph discussed what they would like to change their name to. And they actually alighted on Lauren kind of by accident.
Whilst at school, Ralph Lauren had a very entrepreneurial streak. He was known for his sense of style, and during his time there, he started buying up ties and selling them to his fellow students for a markup. He didn't study fashion, so he came from a very interesting background of retail. And he is known to have said in his yearbook, when asked what he wanted to be when he grew up, he said, "I want to be a millionaire."
During his spare time as well, he worked at Alexander's, which is a now defunct New York department store. So he really got a sense for customers, for retail, but at the same time, his own dress sense was incredibly refined, was incredibly elegant.
After studying at business school, Ralph Lauren served in the army and then went to work as a shop assistant in Brooks Brothers. Now, this was a really transformative period of time for him. He talks often about his relationship with Brooks Brothers, the brand, and how that informed what he went on to do on a global scale.
Ralph Lauren was working for a necktie company called Rivets in New York when he was influenced to make his own design. It was inspired by a style that he saw Douglas Fairbanks Jr. wearing, and the main point of difference was the width. Ralph Lauren proposed a European width tie, which was 4 inches wide, as opposed to the kind of standard 2.5 inches at that point.
These ties were really, really luxury, beautiful materials, beautiful silk, and they were slightly thicker than the norm. At this period, he attempted to sell to Bloomingdale's, and so he took his range to see what they thought. They really didn't think it was right, stated such, and said, no, you know, you've got to make these changes, they're too thick, they're not right for the consumer. And interesting enough, just a few years not even. Later, Bloomingdale's had to come with their tail between their legs, noticing the popularity of this growing brand, by which point Polo.
He got his big breakthrough when Neiman Marcus ordered 1,200 from him. And really what that did was give him a certain confidence and also an injection of capital that allowed him to establish himself under his own name.
In 1964, Lauren went on to marry his wife, Ricky Lobier. They're still together now. He met her when she was an assistant receptionist working in his doctor's practice. And they have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl.
Andrew Lauren is involved in the film industry. David Lauren, his son, is involved in the company, and Dylan, his daughter, is an entrepreneur. So really there is, in an odd way, it's the kind of strands of interest that Ralph Lauren himself had. There's an interest in Hollywood, an interest obviously in fashion, and this idea of entrepreneurship, this idea of going out alone and trying to establish a name for yourself. Really, Ralph's relationship with Ricky, his wife, has also served as an inspiration for his women's wear line. There is that sense that when Ralph Lauren is dressing a man, he's dressing himself. And when he's dressing a woman, he's kind of dressing Ricky. The best-selling bag at Ralph Lauren is called the Ricky bag. It's named after his wife. Ralph Lauren was able to open his Polo necktie store in 1967 from the backing of Norman Hilton. He was a Manhattan clothes millionaire, and he fronted $50,000 for Ralph to establish his own company. It's interesting that he called it Polo because to kind of Ralph Lauren's eyes, Polo was redolent of Europe. It was a sport that was practiced by kings. It was a sport that he felt was very elegant. It was a sport that Ralph Lauren had never actually played himself. But for him, it had all of these kind of connotations that he wanted to have associated with his neckties. It's interesting that the focus is on such a distinct accessory, whereas you can tell immediately that there's a much wider vision behind that. You know that Ralph Lauren's not going to stop at neckties at this point. There's obviously intentions to kind of take over the world. I think when Ralph expands to a full menswear collection in 1968, it's interesting how thorough the vision is straight away. Really, the point of view has been defined as preppy. It's been taken as kind of the apotheosis of the preppy aesthetic, which is kind of waspy American, East Coast, collegiate, affiliated with Ivy League universities, but also having all these echoes of Europe, so echoes of kind of British style, Italian and French styles. There are wider trousers. It's a style that was described at the time as with it, but not too with it. And I think that's a very interesting description. It's a style that kind of reflects what's going on in current fashion, but it's not something that's alienating to the ordinary man.
He's got a real focus on this kind of European ideal. He was very, very interested in the kind of emancipation in terms of tailoring that had been a real feature of the 60s throughout Europe. And this was something that he really wanted to bring to the American markets. And so these were really quite extraordinary in terms of what else was on offer and available.
There's this whole kind of cinematic idea to what Ralph Lauren does, and it's embedded in a reality, but ultimately it's a kind of exaggeration of that. And that's really what he's proposing.
So in 1970, Ralph Lauren won the Coty Award, and he was also had his own boutique shop in Bloomingdale's. Ironic, because very early on they had declined his ties. So he was very much accepted and celebrated during the early 70s.
Commercially, the clothes really chimed with what people wanted to wear at that point in time. People wanted to look fashionable as well as well-dressed, and I think that's really what Ralph Lauren was able to tap into.
By the early 70s, Ralph Lauren had begun to design collections of women's wear.
Lauren's launching a women's wear line was very rooted in the tailoring that he presented, kind of mannish, boxy silhouettes. But the very interesting thing is this is where the Polo horsey first makes its appearance on the cuffs of the shirts. This obviously went on to be the trademark that's still in existence now.
It was a real innovative use of a logo. It helped to establish his name, and obviously it helped to give kind of something different to these clothes, something to differentiate them from men and for women, but also to differentiate them from anything else on the market. it is that idea of Ralph Lauren kind of asserting himself as a fashion designer. I mean, when you think about the Polo shirt that Ralph Lauren launched, it's quite emblematic of what Ralph Lauren does in that it's not a wholly unique design. You know, Polo shirts have been in existence for years. The most famous example being René Lacoste's Polo shirts, which he patented in the 1920s and which have been in production ever since. But really what Ralph Lauren did was take it, tweak the design, offer it in a variety of colours. He offered it in over 20 different colours and really make it kind of a mainstay of the wardrobe.
It was this that he felt really represented a certain Britishness, but also a kind of sporting lifestyle, but represented the elites. And this is something that you can see within his designs, that he's really sort of looking towards this, well, we should say, European aesthetic to inspire his designs and his jackets, his shirts, but then also his sportswear, which has been really greatly important since very, very early on.
As with so much else that Ralph Lauren does, it's incredibly easy to wear. It's easy sportswear that has a connection to a designer, a connection to high fashion, but it's something that's not intimidating for his customers to wear. And I think that's really why it chimed with so many people. That's really why it was so phenomenally successful so early on in his career.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen, all for free. No subscription required.
Hi. Hi. Hi.
By the late 70s, Ralph Lauren had established himself in the fashion world. But his designs would fetch greater exposure when he dressed Hollywood stars such as Diane Keaton in the film Annie Hall.
You play very well.
Oh, yeah? So do you. Oh, God, what a dumb thing to say, right? I mean, you say it, you play well, and then right away I have to say you play well. Oh, God, Annie. Well, oh, well.
I mean, I think the interesting thing when you talk about Ralph Lauren and films is when you talk about Annie Hall in 1977, he didn't actually design the whole wardrobe of it. But when you look at that film, what Diane Keaton wears in it is so unmistakably Ralph Lauren. All the way through, it's alluding to Ralph Lauren's style.
I love what you're wearing.
Oh, you do? Yeah? Oh, well, it's, this tie is a present from Grammy Hall.
Annie Hall is almost of cult status in terms of the garments he designed. They were so sort of manly yet feminine, you know, this androgyny but charming nature to her personality, so in tune with what Woody Allen envisaged.
Conversely, when you look at The Great Gatsby is totally, it's not only that the clothes are in the key of Ralph Lauren, but the whole ideology of the film is tied in with Ralph Lauren's notions of kind of old money, the American class system, a certain kind of aristocratic outlook.
How do you do, old sport? I'm Gatsby. Nick Carraway. It's a pleasure.
The whole film almost seems like it could be an advert for Ralph Lauren. You know, it's all about these ideas that he's trying to conjure up with his clothes. And I think those two films are the ones that have become indelibly associated with him. Even before he started to do homewares, before he started to do multiple lines, there's a real idea of a Ralph Lauren lifestyle. It is Ralph Lauren selling a dream in kind of a cinematic way. He's selling an idea more than clothes. He's selling kind of a life built around those clothes, a dream built around those clothes. And that's probably why his clothes are so potent and why they were so successful.
In 1981, he opened a shop on New Bond Street in London. I think that's a very interesting fact that's often overlooked, that he would be the first American designer to do this.
When Ralph Lauren opened his first international store, he decided to open on New Bond Street, and the store's still there today. I find that very interesting, obviously, because there are so many reflections of British clothing in what Ralph Lauren was doing at that point. But then obviously when he exported those out to the world, the rest of the world was seeing it as something that was very American. So it's very interesting that Ralph Lauren's able to borrow from different cultures, make it identifiably his own and quintessentially American, and then re-export that out to turn a profit.
The Ralph Lauren brand is also synonymous with sportswear, specifically tennis and golf.
I think it's very clever of Ralph Lauren to offer things like tennis clothes and golf clothes, because really there's lots of allusions to those in his line in any case. And the fact the whole line was called Polo was after sportswear, was after a sporting pursuit of the kind of the upper classes. By the 1980s, those sports were more mass market. Those sports were being pursued by all different kinds of people. But by Ralph Lauren tying his brand in with them, he was able to kind of offer aspirational clothes again. When you look at Ralph Lauren outfitting the umpires and the ball girls and ball boys of Wimbledon, he actually combined the Ralph Lauren logo with the Wimbledon logo to create something unique for the uniforms he created for them. And obviously that's also been reflected in the uniforms he creates for the American teams at the Olympics. It looked like something that could be from one of his advertising campaigns in the mid-70s. And I really think there is that sense of classicism to what he does. Even when you look at the Wimbledon clothes, they're not based around kind of modern tennis gear. There's a certain nostalgia, there's a nostalgia for the past. And I think that's something that's incredibly important in what Ralph Lauren does. It's something that's incredibly appealing to what he does. It's all about the good life. It's all about bettering yourself through the clothes that you put on your back. And there might be high-performance sports gear that does the job better, but you're not going to look as good doing it.
Throughout his career, Ralph Lauren has won numerous accolades, including 7 Coty American Fashion Critics Awards.
It's quite natural for America to honour what Ralph Lauren has done, because really he's one of the keynote designers of New York and remains to be today. You know, you see him being inducted into the Coty Hall of Fame, receiving a CFDA award. It's really about acknowledging his creativity, because I think there is a lot of creativity in what Ralph Lauren does. When you look at it today, it's quite difficult to comprehend that no one had really done this before. No one had really kind of combined these different notions of kind of European upper class and Hollywood and designed a kind of new hybrid of those. It's almost like he's receiving these awards for being a director rather than a fashion designer, because it's not so much the garments that he created as the image that he created around them that I think has been so potent and so long-lasting. It's something that still sells today.
The Ralph Lauren Corporation was founded when they went public, and there are a full rostrum of brands that sit under this umbrella. Black Label, Purple Label, which are both much more luxury, and then ranging right down to Chaps, which is a franchise of Ralph Lauren.
I think when you look at the Ralph Lauren Corporation, the fact it splinters off into all these different lines, it's really about kind of satisfying lots of different sections of the marketplace. You know, Ralph Lauren Purple line, for instance, is the incredibly expensive collection. But at the same time, the strength of that vision has to be backed up with something more mass market, something that can appeal to a broader audience. I think it's really that whole idea that if you're selling a dream, you've got to be able to sell it to lots of different price points. You've got to be able to hit lots of different consumers. And Ralph Lauren understood that from the get-go. You know, he understood it very early on that there was a mass appeal to what he was doing. It wasn't just about kind of European couture elite. It was about ready-to-wear, and it was about ready-to-wear for the masses. Ralph Lauren saying that people that wear his clothes don't think of them as fashion is really a kind of acknowledgement that I suppose that it's about a certain style, as opposed to about things changing season on season, proposing new looks, new silhouettes. He's not really interested in moving with what's going on in fashion. He's just proposing a constant wardrobe.
Over the years, Ralph Lauren has amassed a collection of rare and expensive automobiles, with over 70 cars held at his estate in New York.
Again, kind of ties into this idea of the good life. It ties into this idea of a sort of American aristocracy. You know, in Europe, aristocrats and the wealthy would collect art, but in America it makes sense for them to collect cars. There's something incredibly American about it, I think. Ralph Lauren's estimated net worth is $8 billion. He's placed 155th on Forbes' rich list. I think now it's interesting because it's almost like Ralph Lauren is his own best advertisement. People want to aspire to the lifestyle of Ralph Lauren. After he's been emulating film stars, Ralph Lauren kind of is a film star now. He has the same sort of life that he used to hanker after. And when he himself was featuring in his advertising campaigns in the mid-70s, it's almost like he wasn't as unobtainable as a model or as a movie star. And it was making it kind of aspirational but achievable. This whole idea that if you buy into his clothes, you could buy yourself a better life. I think that's a very important message in everything that he does.
I think there's such an aspirational nature to the clothing and the designs. Even from, if we go right back, looking at Ralph Lauren's childhood growing up in a middle-class area to immigrant parents, there has been a real rags to riches within reason tale there. And I think that's something that he's quite conscious of when creating his world, which people do really want to buy into. An interesting point made about when you look from the outside into the Ralph Lauren shops, one of the very last things you notice almost is the clothes in the scenes in the window. It's more about how they all fit together so beautifully.
I think when you talk about the legacy of Ralph Lauren, you really go back to the words that Ralph Lauren himself has stated as kind of the motto of his company, which is that we don't sell fashion, we sell a way of life. That's expressed throughout what he does. It's the idea that it isn't just limited to the clothes on the catwalk or the clothes on your back. It's this whole idea that somehow by buying a piece of that, you're buying a piece of a better existence.
Ralph Lauren's legacy, I think he's very much tangled up in that history in terms of American design, going from tailoring and suiting to being a multifaceted international global brand power. Also, Ralph Lauren kind of pulling upon these American motifs such as Americana, Western, creating New Mexico in terms of the collection. I think that those things really will become synonymous with what he did, looking at around him and creating something that does really refer to American culture.
There is a sense that what Ralph Lauren's offering is so potent and is so all-encompassing that when someone sees it, they want every aspect of that life for themselves. You know, there are people whose entire wardrobes, whose entire homes are kitted out by Ralph Lauren. And it's the entirety of that vision is something that people don't find alienating. They don't find it artificial. A lot of people believe in Ralph Lauren's dream and they want it for themselves. And that's the kind of power of what he does, and that's why it's so potent for so many people. People just want to live that life. People want to look at a Ralph Lauren advertising campaign and want to be part of it. They want to live as part of that kind of perfect life.